Good morning, church. As we continue to push forward throughout this week, I pray that you would lay everything at the feet of Jesus. Whether you have any worries, any struggles, any problems, any issues or worries, whatever it might be, that you would take it all to the feet of Jesus. And in doing so, that you would find hope, that you would find peace, reassurance, comfort, that you would find satisfaction in Him. Now with that, let's begin. Now when I was growing up in elementary school, my friends and I would always try to find ways to joke around, even when it came to things that you probably wouldn't want to joke around with, like math homework. Now, for example, hear me out. 1 plus 1 is 2, right? But as kids, we would joke around and say, no. 1 plus 1 equals 11. Like, look, it's very clear. Some of the kids, including myself at first, had questions. We had our doubts. We would ask, we would interrogate them, and the kids that were joking around and giving these answers would say really random things, and sometimes these very outlandish justifications. For example, some of them would say, hey bro, I get straight A's, or hey bro, I have an A in this class, did you know that? Or I got 100% on my last quiz. And they would be like, hey, just trust me, Tim. Trust me, bro. Now, these days, I look at social media, and sometimes the content itself of social media is not really that fun. But what's more entertaining sometimes is looking at the comments, what people say. For example, I think there was a post that I saw that had some kind of random statistic or some kind of pie chart. For example, the use of watermelon. And it showed in this pie chart the percentage of how many people use it for eating, and then the rest of the pie chart was that people use it for spitting out seeds. Now, some of you guys might be thinking all right, where did you get that? Where did you get that information? Or that's kind of weird, or that's kind of odd. And then in the comments, there's always going to be someone that says, source, trust me, bro. Now, whether it's because it doesn't make sense to us, or maybe because the person that posted it or is saying it seems to be credible, but the information doesn't reflect that, it can be really hard to trust whatever somebody is saying. Now, in Korean, there's a saying that goes like this. It's 네 말은 앞뒤가 안 맞아, or 앞뒤가 안 맞아. So in English, this translates to things are not adding up, or I guess the literal translation is the things that you're saying, the front and the end of it, they just don't match. Now, this saying can be used in many different situations, but typically we could use it in the sense of interrogation, or if we're, in questioning somebody, and maybe the story that somebody shares, it just doesn't make any sense, right? The details are not lining up, or maybe the story is really out of order, and maybe the person just seems credible, reliable, but the story just doesn't match. And in this instance, we would say, 앞뒤가 안 맞네, right? Or the story just doesn't add up. None of it adds up. Now today we move into another letter of Paul. It's a short 3-chapter letter that was written to someone by the name of Titus. Now this letter was considered to be written around the same time as 1 Timothy, but it was before 2 Timothy, so it's kind of in the middle. And this letter is one of the most overlooked books of the Bible, in my opinion. You would find that the message of this book is quite timely. Now, Titus, because we don't know much about him, we have to kind of take clues from other letters that Paul wrote. And he appears actually in 3 of Paul's letters, in 2 Corinthians, in Galatians, and in 2 Timothy. Now, we know that Titus is a Greek Christian, and he was with Paul during a lot of times of conflict that he experienced in different churches. And because of that, we know that Paul saw Titus as one of his closest and most trusted friends in the ministry. Now, Paul is writing this letter to Titus, who's found on the island of Crete, or he was located to the island of Crete, which doesn't seem like a big deal to us, but if you look closer and look at the context, you'll find that the island of Crete was a pretty crazy island. Now, Crete is an island that's found off of the coast of Greece, and it had a very bad reputation, but it was a reputation that it was influenced by Greek mythology, a lot. And they believed that the greatest Greek god ever, Zeus, was buried on their island. So Crete was a central place of worship for these lowercase g gods. Now, another issue and reputation that these people had was that they were known to be notorious liars, partially because of the fact that the gods they worshipped and adored, they themselves were also liars. Now, it's so bad that even a philosopher of their own kind describes them this way. Paul refers to this philosopher in verse 12. He says, Cretans are always liars, evil brutes, and lazy gluttons, right? Man, that's terrible. And in ancient days, if you were called a Cretan, or if somebody called you a Cretan, that was another way of calling somebody a liar. But the pressing concern for Paul in this letter was that Christians on this island started to become more like the Zeus god versus the one true God of the universe. Look at Titus chapter 1, verse 16. It says, "They claim to know God, but by their actions they deny him. They are detestable, disobedient, and unfit for doing anything good." This is what we would call 앞뒤가 안 맞아, right? The numbers aren't adding up. Paul is telling Titus that there's this irony of people claiming to know about God, yet when people look at them, they are acting anything but that. Okay, and to Paul, that's a big problem. Verse 13, if you backtrack a little bit, Paul gives the permission for Titus to rebuke these very people, these very Christians that were living a life that was not reflecting their knowledge of God. And he says, call them out. But the purpose of calling them out is so that they will become sound in their faith. And that is so important, because you might meet people that claim to be Christian, but then we see them doing things that are not very Christ-like. And you see, it's our job as Christians to call them out, but it's not about trying to make them feel bad or to make ourselves look like we're right or we have the truth. It's so that we can help them realign back to the truth, right? To become sound in their faith. And remember, this is all done in love. But one thing that I want you to pull away from this, and one thing we can ask ourselves is, am I living a life as a Christian where the numbers are lining up? Or am I living a life as a Christian where 앞뒤가 맞아 or 안 맞아? Am I living a life as a Christian where people know that we know God, but also see that in the things we do, in our actions? I want to leave this with you today. Let's live a life where the numbers line up, and let's live a life that reflects the gospel message.